Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we've got some more rain warnings issued for the southwest over the next couple of days, as we are going to continue to see heavy rain moving in as the jet stream continues to pound us from the west. We're able to see that in detail on the latest UKV, which does highlight all the precipitation and temperature we're most likely going to see over the next 5 days. It is going to be very up and down in terms of temperatures. Lots of cold days like today. We're really struggling in the mid to high single digits, but equally some other days, like perhaps on into the weekend, we could see 14, 15 degrees within a milder sector. Now, many of you probably are watching this video because the longer range does continue to look incredibly interesting. Now, as we saw in yesterday's video, the GM showed a pretty ridiculously cold run, which did produce widespread snowfall. Now, as I said in yesterday's video, it's highly unlikely that that sort of scenario comes off, and pretty typical from the longer range models as we head towards winter. The GM has gone a complete reversal today and is the most westerly based run this afternoon. Now, it is, as I said yesterday, it is looking most likely that we do see transient colder pattern instead of a proper blocked freezing cold northerly wind like the GEM was showing, and that is definitely what the GFS and the Eastern OF are going for today. Cold air moving in, snow showers in places, but not lasting more than a few days, but there could be multiple blasts. So we'll have a look at that in detail in the second half of the video, and of course have a look at what the latest ensembles are showing as well, as that does show sort of the whole array of scenarios available. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see there are quite a few showers around at the moment in the Irish Sea, for Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and they are moving eastwards and will quickly sweep through tonight, giving a period of heavy rain quite widely for many northern areas, but even extending further southwards as well. Now, out towards the Channel into the North Sea, you can see there is some persistent rain still lingering in places, and we actually thought this rain was going to be much further northwards, and in the end, most of this heavy rain that you can now see across parts of northern France did actually stay out in the Channel. So again, the models did struggle really with the positioning of this rain, like it did a couple of days ago where we saw that thunderstorm warning issued and we saw that rain move much further inland. This rain stayed much further out to sea, so definitely highlighting the struggles the models do have with channel lows, and we do see that we'll particularly pick up on that whenever we do see a channel low and a colder flow, when there is a lot of interest and eyes on the possibility of snow. But in this scenario, of course, just some heavier rain, and it did, as I said, move further southward than initially anticipated a couple of days ago. But as I said, rainfall moving through tonight, and we'll continue to see repeated bouts over the coming days. Now, it has been a cold day today, lots of blues on the map, as under that cloud and rain, it's pushed in, giving us cold conditions at the surface because of all the thick cloud and rainfall falling, but also normally when we see a weather front move in from the west, it will introduce a milder air mass, so kind of negating those impacts and perhaps even giving a rise to the temperatures. But as I said, it's a channel low, so it kind of slid to our south, not actually allowing any mild air to move in. So it's actually kept most of us pretty cold today, pretty chilly indeed, making it feel like a proper winter's day. Now, I said there is more rain incoming, and we do have weather warnings issued for Friday and Saturday here for the southwest of England into South Wales from 9 p.m. tomorrow night until 3 p.m. on Saturday. Another spell of heavy rain is likely in this area Friday night and Saturday morning. Here, another area of rain will continue to move across the UK starting from Friday evening before it clears to the east during Saturday. Some of the rain, especially in the southwestern parts of the UK, is likely to be very heavy at times and may, and of course, follows many weeks of above average rainfall in this region. 10 to 15 millimetres expected widely, maybe 20 to 30 millimetres in a few areas, and locally 40 to 50 millimetres. High likelihood lower under the impact, so we're not expecting anything too crazy from this, but as I said, falling onto very saturated ground already could cause some issues. Now, if you do look at the latest UKV to see how the rainfall is going to evolve over the next few days, you can see that rain to the south today did actually stay really right along the shore, out to sea for most, and still some patches of it lingering through this evening. Those showers moving in from the east tonight, giving quite widespread heavier rain for a small period of time, but it does quickly sweep eastwards and is pretty disintegrated by the early hours of the morning. Into tomorrow, it's actually a relatively dry day as we're in between weather systems, but you can see that heavier rain moving in from the southwest, and it does give heavy rain quite widely up and down the country into Saturday, for eventually clearing into the afternoon. By Saturday evening, more showers packing in from the west, and into Sunday again, another very showery outlook. And then Monday again, more showers coming in from the north, as we do see a bit of a northerly wind arrive. Nothing crazy, but a bit of a mid-Atlantic ridge for a time, which is going to be the real area of interest where that high pressure goes in the longer term. We'll decide, as I said, the colder spell potentially in to the end of November. But at this stage, if we do have a look at the mean sea level pressure, you can see it out in the Atlantic, giving a bit of a northerly wind, slightly chilly air mass moving in, but nothing too crazy. You can see that here. The upper air temperatures are slightly below average, but nothing particularly cold at this stage. But much colder air is lingering to our north and could push in as we head into the final week of November. Now, to look at the temperatures, you can see today really quite cold, 6 to 9 degrees quite widely, so really struggling under that cloud and rain. Into tomorrow could be a bit of a frost in northern areas, and by the afternoon, temperatures rising slightly higher, maybe 7 to 11 degrees. And then as we head into Saturday, again, could be a frost in the north, but temperatures rising higher further south and westwards as rainfall sweeps in. And look at that, 13 to 15 degrees quite widely. Into Sunday, again, seeing temperatures dropping slightly, maybe 10 to 12 degrees, but still generally around average. And then finally into Monday, again, looking at sort of 9 to 11 degrees. So pretty reasonable over the coming days, but a little bit up and down, but with plenty of heavy rain in place, especially in that southwestern corner and further northwards with showers as well. But if you do now have a look at the longer range, which many of you will be very interested in seeing, you can see at the moment we've got a westerly flow, no signs of anything cold at all. Now this continues over the coming days, and you can see into next week we see that Atlantic ridge build in, and we see a bit of a northerly or northeasterly wind. Could go chilly, could go a little bit frosty at times, but not developing anything significant. It's at this stage we get to sort of day 7 where we see huge uncertainty. Now in the latest GFS it does build a ridge up towards Greenland and is starting to veer the wind into the north. Other runs like the GEM we'll see today, which does completely revert its northerly wind yesterday, doesn't have that ridge extending northwards and actually holds these blues more together, showing a stronger tropospheric polar vortex powering those westerly winds more. Here we see that ridge move northwards, but unfortunately it's not as successful as some of the runs over the past few days, and it does get toppled quite quickly. But it does extend far enough north that we do see a pretty potent northerly wind for at least a few days into the final week of November. It does go cold, probably snow showers around, and it takes a while for that ridge to completely topple before westerly winds return. But still, if we look to our north, if we do refresh this to see right towards the end of the run, you can see still got substantial blocking to our north, again increasing the risk that we could see another plunge of cold air. You can see it is very cold to our east, a big pool of below average air that could head our way if that blocking does get going. So yes, GFS doesn't show anything near as cold as the GM yesterday, but it does show potentially a cold blast lasting a few days with snow showers around, plenty of widespread frost and well below average temperatures, and then the longer term keeps that very cold air close by, which we could tap into if those synoptics do get a little bit more favourable. So GFS, quite a realistic run this. I can see this very much coming off, but not quite the sustained, bitterly cold pattern the GEM was showing, and some of the other runs have been showing over the last couple of days. As I said, it is highly unlikely we do see something like that. This is a more realistic scenario, but again, we can't rule it out at this stage. Now, if you compare to the GEM, as I said yesterday, there was freezing cold, as many of you have seen by the thumbnail yesterday. It was a proper Greenland high with a direct northerly from the North Pole. Today, though, if we get to that day 7 point, that's where we see the ridge heading up towards Greenland. Now, it does get there a little bit. You can see these blues are closer together, a little bit stronger, those lower pressure systems. And the high pressure to our south doesn't really push away, holds. And look what happens. We see a flat westerly. Couldn't be anywhere near different. Couldn't be more different to what we were showing yesterday, and even compared to the GFS, which did produce colder air pushing in, just not quite as cold as some other runs were showing. Today, though, GM is pretty much off the charts mild. So yesterday, it was probably the coldest Ensemble member and coldest operational run. Today, it's probably the mildest. So just showing you the very up and down nature of the models with this sort of scenario, just showing how difficult it is to say what is going to happen. Now, if you look at the latest ECMWF, this is the midnight run, as the midday run hasn't updated as I'm recording this, so it's slightly out of date. The other two runs were the 12 o'clock run, so we do have to, of course, take notice of that. But again, as we've seen the very much big oscillations between runs recently, I wouldn't say any individual run is wrong or any individual run is right. But this midnight run, we see that brief northerly wind early next week, and then we see similar things to the GFS. We do see a northerly wind arrive, pretty fresh, cold air. You see the -5 isoform gets in for most, eventually toppling away, only lasting, as I said, a few days, but producing plenty of frost and fog. If we do look to the northern hemisphere, unlike the GFS, is not quite aligned for potentially more blocking into the future, showing more of a westerly flow. So ECMWF showing a bit of a colder blast for a couple of days, and then reverting back to a westerly. Again, quite a realistic scenario, but definitely backing off quite a bit from that sort of sustained block we were seeing only a few days ago. Now, if you finish by having a look at the latest ensembles, latest GFS ensembles are just updating as I speak, and unfortunately only goes out to day 8 here, and that's pretty much where that cold air starts to push in. So no real point looking at the midday run yet. As you can see, it is pretty close together, the ensembles here towards the sort of 23rd, 24th. So again, it's not really showing us the scatter. But you can see into the longer range, though, definitely good signs that it is drying up. If we do look at the 6 o'clock run, though, you can see pretty much where the midday run got to, where we got this little spike here as the high pressure builds in, where all the ensemble members are in relative agreement, and then we see the plunge, where most ensemble members do go below average. The GFS here is pretty bullish of a below average colder spell, some going well below average down towards the -5 region, which would be cold enough for snowfall in places. Here, though, not all runs going in for it. Still a lot of scatter, but definitely favouring a colder scenario. You can see the GFS run from the 6 o'clock was all over the place. It did go very cold for a few days, very mild, and then went chillier once again. The 2 meter temperature is also on a decreasing trend, so even if it doesn't go bitterly cold like the GEM was showing yesterday, probably still will only be 5 or 6 degrees under these more moderately colder runs like the latest GFS or even the ECMWF today. The sea level pressure is rising towards the 21st to 24th, and then dropping beyond that as we do see colder air move in with a bit more of an unstable flow. And the biggest indicator of colder air masses moving in is the dew point. You can see here in the longer range, definitely trending more towards freezing, indicating dry, cold air masses moving in. The most likely wind direction is looking from the north or northwest. So if it was more of a west or southwest, those dew points would be a lot higher. So definitely give us a good indication that the wind direction is definitely looking more from that northwesterly or northerly direction with a fresh, dry air mass moving in. Now, if you compare to the ECMWF midnight run, you can see it's nowhere near as bullish. Definitely slightly cooler spell there around the 25th or 26th, but then after that, we trend average and pretty much hanging around average. Precipitation increases, so perhaps signs of lower pressure moving back in or more deep areas of low pressure moving back in. Still some very cold runs, -5 to -10, but equally some milder runs up towards +5 to +10. So no big consistency here from the ECMWF. It has shown this for a couple of days now, where it's not really going bullish at all. It's kind of just staying very scattered and all over the place in the longer term. So unfortunately, it's not giving us a lot of insight, as this isn't really showing us much anyway. Not showing us any that it's sort of moving milder, not showing us it's moving colder, drier, or wetter. So it's kind of no point really looking at this today. It's not got any major indications. It's generally just hovering around average. The only thing it would say is keep that uncertainty that we do continue to have. Finally, just want to compare to the GEM ensembles, as we'll be able to see. Actually, unfortunately, the midday run hasn't updated, but again, you can see the earlier run was colder, and I do expect this midday run from the GM to be off the scale mild. It does get up to the 10-degree isotherm there in the longer range from the operational run, so I do expect it to be a massive milder outlier. So later on, do check it out, and you'll be able to see that it is going to be a massive milder outlier, but it just shows you the volatility of the models with this sort of pressure pattern. So continue to look at next week with real interest potentially for northerly winds moving in. If I did have to put money on it, I would say I think we are looking at a northerly blast. I don't think it's going to be sustained, i.e. a proper block, widespread cold lasting more than sort of 3 or 4 days. I do think there is a real possibility, though, that we do see our first sort of Arctic blast of the season. The -5 isotherm getting in for many, at least for a time, maybe quite widely in the north, seeing lots of frost around, generally chilly conditions, and the risk of wintry showers, and maybe even some quite beefy snow showers in the north. I think that's the most likely scenario, and that is kind of what the GFS and even the East of the West are hinting at today. I do think that sort of the models are not going to be completely disregard the block like the GEM does. It is a possibility, but from what we've seen over the last few days, I definitely sway towards seeing colder spell, but I don't think at this stage it's going to be anything ridiculous, of course, unless we do see some big shifts from some of those ensembles and see a bit more consistency with some colder runs from the operational runs at this stage. But that is just what I think, and of course winter period, especially through December, January, where we do have loads of conflicting climate drivers, it is very difficult to forecast sort of 3 to 5 days out, let alone a week to 10 days away like we are with this pattern. And we'll just have to keep a very close eye on it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you stay safe in all the rain and generally unsettled conditions we can have over the next few days. Do keep up to date with videos to see if we're going to see something cold, as I said, into the last week of November.